Silent signs of depression. No one notices. Depression is a quiet companion. It doesn't always wear a face of sadness. It doesn't always leave a trail of tears. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, in the soft silence between words, in the empty spaces where joy used to be, in the subtle shifts of behavior that go unnoticed by those around us. It is the person who seems fine, who smiles when asked, who shows up when expected, and yet, within them, something is quietly shifting, slowly retreating, withdrawing. The silent signs of depression are easy to overlook, because they don't scream for attention, they whisper, and often, no one listens. This is the story of those silent signs, the ones you may not see, but that speak volumes to those who know how to listen. There is a quiet kind of sorrow that lives in those who suffer in silence. It is not the loud cry for help, the desperate outpouring of emotion, the overt sadness that everyone notices. It is the kind of sadness that wears a mask of normalcy, a mask of smiles, a mask that says, "I'm fine," even when nothing inside feels fine. It is the person who shows up, who goes through the motions, who greets the world with the expected words and gestures. They are the ones who appear to have it all together, the ones whose lives seem orderly, whose routines seem stable, whose social lives seem active. But behind the mask, something different is happening. There is an inner quiet that feels like an absence, the absence of joy, the absence of hope, the absence of energy to care anymore. The struggle with silent depression often lies in this disconnect, the gap between how the world perceives you and how you feel inside. You may not want anyone to know. You may feel the pressure to maintain appearances, to meet the expectations of others, to prove that you're okay, even when everything within you feels anything but okay. It is not that you are faking happiness, but that the sadness is so deeply embedded, so woven into the fabric of your daily life, that it becomes part of you. A part that doesn't always demand attention, but simply remains, quietly, at the edges of everything you do. It sits beside you in conversations. It lingers in your thoughts as you move through your day. It colors your actions, even when you are unaware of it. The mask of normalcy is a survival strategy. It is the need to shield yourself from the world's expectations, to avoid being seen as weak or incapable, to protect yourself from the vulnerability of showing pain. You may fear the judgment of others, the pity in their eyes, the way they might look at you differently if they knew what you were really going through. And so, you wear the mask, not to deceive, but to protect yourself from the vulnerability of being seen. There is a loneliness that comes with this kind of silence. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of hiding your true self from the world. It is a quiet kind of isolation, the kind that doesn't require physical distance, but emotional distance. You find yourself withdrawing not because you want to, but because you can no longer connect in the same way. The world feels distant, like you are moving through it, but not truly a part of it. And yet, no one notices. The mask is so convincing, so polished, that the world doesn't see what lies beneath. You may feel like you are on the outside of your own life, watching yourself go through the motions, but never really being there. You smile when expected, speak when spoken to, and do the things you are supposed to do. But inside, you feel numb, disconnected, empty. It is a heaviness that doesn't show on the surface, but weighs on you, draining you bit by bit until it becomes your new normal. This chapter explores the experience of wearing the mask of normalcy, the way silent depression doesn't always show in tears or isolation, but in the quiet exhaustion of pretending to be fine. It is the recognition of the gap between your internal world and the world others see. It is the understanding that sometimes the deepest pain is the one that goes unnoticed, the one that doesn't make a sound but speaks volumes to those who can listen with understanding. The mask is not a lie, it is a form of protection, But the danger is in how long you wear it and how it becomes harder to remove over time. You may tell yourself that you'll be fine, that you're just going through a rough patch, that you'll get through it on your own. But the longer you wear the mask, the more it becomes your reality, and the silence of depression deepens until it can no longer be ignored. There is a weight that depression carries with it, a weight that does not announce itself loudly, but presses down slowly, silently, until it becomes the air you breathe. It is not the obvious weight of tears falling or of grief spilling over. It is the unseen weight, the weight of exhaustion, of numbness, of a heaviness that fills the body and the mind, even when everything outwardly appears calm. You wake up each day, but waking doesn't always feel like living. It feels like going through the motions, like a performance you've learned to master. You put on your clothes, make your breakfast, interact with others, but something inside you is so tired, so worn out, that it feels like every action is a burden. It is not that you cannot function, but that functioning takes everything from you. The weight is invisible to the outside world, but it is deeply felt within. It is the heaviness of living without feeling, without energy, without the desire to reach out for joy. You are simply existing, not living. This weight comes not from one moment, but from many. It accumulates over time, layer by layer, until it feels as though it is part of your very being. It sits in your chest, in your shoulders, in the pit of your stomach. It follows you through every waking moment, waiting to be acknowledged, yet never fully recognized. And so, you carry it in silence, unseen by the world, but always present within you. The weight of depression is often dismissed, especially when it does not manifest in outward sadness or withdrawal. It is the quiet struggle of someone who is still going to work, still seeing friends, still performing the rituals of daily life, but doing so without the energy, without the spark, without the will to feel connected to anything. It is the weight that makes every interaction feel like an effort, every task feel like a mountain, every decision feel like a chore. You know you're supposed to feel alive, but the weight makes it hard to remember what that feels like. Sometimes it is not the inability to do things, but the inability to find meaning in them. You wake up, and there is no excitement for the day ahead. You move through your work, but the tasks feel mechanical, without joy or fulfillment. You spend time with people, but it feels like you're missing a piece of yourself. The piece that once laughed freely, that once engaged deeply, that once felt present. Now, you are simply a version of yourself, one who is operating on autopilot, drifting through life without the energy to feel it fully. The hardest part is that this weight is often misunderstood. It is invisible to the world. People may see you functioning, see you doing the things you're supposed to do, and assume everything is fine. But behind the surface, you are tired of carrying the weight of a life that feels disconnected from who you really are. You may tell others that you're okay, because you don't have the energy to explain the quiet storm within. You may smile, you may laugh, but beneath that mask, there is a heaviness that no one can see and no one can carry for you. The weight of depression is also the weight of unexpressed emotions. Feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and confusion sit inside you, but you don't always know how to express them. You may not even fully understand them yourself. They build up quietly, layer by layer, until they become so ingrained in your being that you can't always tell where they end and you begin. It is not about feeling bad, it is about feeling nothing at all. The weight comes from the emotional numbness that slowly takes over, from the disconnect between who you are on the outside and who you feel on the inside. This weight doesn't always go away with time. It doesn't always lift when the circumstances improve. It is not something that can be fixed by simply changing your environment or by trying harder. The weight of depression is something that must be acknowledged, something that must be felt in its full depth before it can begin to lift. It is a weight that carries with it a kind of quiet wisdom, the wisdom of knowing that life is not always as it seems, that healing is a slow process, and that sometimes it is okay to simply carry the weight for a while, without the need to justify it or explain it to others. In this chapter, we recognize the weight of depression, not the obvious weight that the world can see, but the silent, unseen burden that so many carry. It is the weight that comes with living in a world that expects constant joy, constant engagement, constant participation, while inside, you are silently worn down. And it is through recognizing this weight that healing begins, not by pushing it away, but by understanding it, by giving it space to exist, and by allowing yourself the grace to carry it, even when the world cannot see it. The most profound changes that come with depression are not always visible. They do not announce themselves in loud ways. They are not the tears that fall, nor the long silences that stretch into loneliness. Instead, they appear in the subtle, often unnoticed shifts in behavior. The things that others don't see. The things you may not even recognize in yourself. Over time, depression finds its way into the small details. It changes how you interact with the world, how you show up in relationships, how you engage with life. At first, these shifts are so small, so seemingly insignificant, that they can easily be overlooked. You might stop returning messages as promptly, begin skipping social events that once brought joy, or lose interest in activities that once sparked enthusiasm. It's not that you no longer care. It's that you no longer have the energy to care. This is often the first behavioral sign of depression, a gradual withdrawal, not a complete disappearance, but a quiet pulling back. It's a retreat into your own world, a retreat that doesn't feel like isolation, but like the world is simply becoming too much. It's easier not to engage, easier not to try, easier to say, "I'm too tired," even when you know you don't have a concrete reason for the fatigue. You might find yourself saying no more often, but it's not because you no longer value your relationships or activities. It's because every yes requires more energy than you can spare. Every invitation feels like another demand on a well that has already been emptied. You begin to withdraw not out of dislike, but out of necessity, a necessity that is not always understood, not by others, and sometimes not even by you. This withdrawal often manifests in the physical realm as well, a sense of heaviness in the body, a reluctance to move, a slow and steady avoidance of exercise, or of the simple daily tasks that once felt manageable. It is not laziness. It is the slow buildup of emotional and physical exhaustion, the weariness that comes from constantly trying to manage an inner world that feels overwhelming. When depression takes root, it doesn't just take over the mind, it takes over the body, leaving it feeling sluggish, empty, disconnected. You may notice that your appetite changes, either eating less or eating more, not because you want to, but because the body is responding to the emotional toll. Food may no longer taste the same, and eating may become a source of comfort or a way to fill the emptiness that is felt in other ways. The loss of interest in eating or a tendency to eat compulsively are both silent signs. Quiet shifts in behavior that indicate something deeper is at play. It is also the subtle shift in communication. At first, you might not notice that you are sharing less, talking less about your day, your feelings, your thoughts. The simple act of conversation may start to feel exhausting. Engagement with others can feel like a performance, a role you are playing without truly being present. The things you once talked about with ease now feel like burdens, and the effort it takes to share anything, whether happy or sad, feels draining. Over time, these behavioral shifts become your new normal. You may look in the mirror and realize that you've been wearing a mask for so long that you no longer know what lies beneath. You may question whether anyone has noticed the changes in you, or if you have simply become invisible in your own life. And yet, the signs are there. In the missed calls, in the unreturned texts, in the empty spaces in your calendar, and in the slow, steady retreat from the world around you. The difficulty with these hidden shifts is that they are easy to miss, both for you and for others. There is no obvious cry for help. There is no distinct moment when you can say, "This is when I started to pull away." It happens gradually in the smallest of ways. A choice to stay home instead of going out. An afternoon spent in bed instead of meeting friends. The slow decision to stop trying, even though you haven't yet admitted it to yourself. This chapter is about recognizing these subtle shifts, the ones that don't scream for attention, but that speak volumes about the inner world of someone dealing with depression. It is the quiet realization that depression doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like silence. It looks like withdrawal, like the absence of energy, like the slow, unnoticed retreat from life. And in recognizing these behaviors, we start to understand that depression is not just a feeling. It is a way of being, a way of living with a weight that doesn't always show on the surface, but that affects everything beneath it. Depression is often not about loud expressions of sadness. It is about the quiet shift in emotions that no one sees. It is the subtle erosion of feeling, the way the world begins to lose its color without you noticing it happen. It is the slow, creeping sensation of emptiness that fills the spaces where joy, enthusiasm, and hope used to be. You may not wake up and feel suddenly overwhelmed with sorrow, but something feels off. There is a heaviness in the chest that wasn't there before, a slight dullness in the mind that dulls the sharpness of the world around you. The moments that once sparked excitement now pass by without much notice. You find it harder to feel the things you used to love, the things that once made you smile, the things that once lit you up. Now they just pass by, unnoticed, unimportant. These subtle emotional indicators are the quiet red flags that depression plants in the garden of your heart. They don't scream for attention, but they are there, growing quietly, until you look back and realize that the garden you once tended has begun to wilt. You may find yourself unable to feel true joy, but also unable to feel deep sadness. You exist in a gray space, neither up nor down, neither light nor dark, simply numb. It's not the absence of emotion altogether, but the absence of vibrant emotion, the dulling of life's colors. This emotional numbness is one of the trickiest aspects of depression. It isn't easily recognized because it doesn't look like typical sadness. It isn't a depression that is immediately obvious to others because it doesn't show in tears or anger. It is quiet, hidden beneath a calm exterior. You may still laugh, still speak, still engage in daily activities, but something inside is missing. Something that makes you feel fully alive is gone, and you don't always know how to find it again. In relationships, these emotional shifts can create distance. You may notice that you have a harder time connecting with others, not because you don't care, but because the emotional capacity that once made you present with them is gone. Your responses feel automatic, robotic even, as if you are just going through the motions of connection. You want to care, you want to be there, but something inside you is too drained, too empty, to engage fully. It is in the little moments that this emotional absence becomes apparent. A favorite song no longer stirs anything in you. A movie you once loved now feels like just another distraction. A joke that would have once made you laugh now falls flat, and you find yourself wondering, was I ever really happy? Or perhaps you wonder why it's so hard to feel the same level of joy, the same sense of connection, the same excitement you once did. The emotional shift also shows up in how you respond to others. You may feel detached, unable to offer the empathy and support that you once did. You may find yourself too drained to really listen, too tired to engage emotionally. Your capacity to hold space for someone else's emotions is there, but it is muted, like your own emotional resources are running on empty. You care, but it feels like a distant care, not the deeply connected, vibrant empathy that used to flow so naturally. And then there are the moments of hopelessness. It's not the kind of hopelessness that screams for help, but a quiet kind. The kind that says, "What's the point?" It's the subtle belief that things will never truly change, that the cycle will continue, that you will always feel this way. It's the sense that the future holds nothing brighter, nothing better, and that the weight you carry today will be the same weight you carry tomorrow. This emotional numbness can be one of the hardest parts of silent depression. It is easy to overlook because it doesn't look like the sadness we are accustomed to seeing. It doesn't have the sharp edges of grief or the visible exhaustion of burnout. It simply feels like a gradual retreat from life itself, a slow, steady detachment from the world you once knew. It is a quiet departure of energy, a gentle fading of connection, until everything feels a little too distant, a little too far away. But acknowledging this subtle shift is the first step toward healing. Recognizing the numbness is not about forcing an immediate change, but about giving it space to be seen. The emotional indicators of depression may not always be loud, but they are powerful. And in recognizing them, you begin to allow yourself to reconnect with what has been lost. You begin to see the emotional disconnection for what it is, a signal, not an end. It is a moment of reflection, a moment when the heart begins to speak softly and quietly, but still, loud enough to be heard. There is a silent kind of guilt that accompanies depression, one that does not come from the actions of others, but from within. It is the guilt of hiding your truth, of not letting others in on the weight you carry, of pretending to be okay when inside you feel anything but. It is a guilt that grows quietly, settling into your chest, settling into your body, a quiet reminder that you are not being truthful. You know that you are hiding, that you are withholding parts of yourself, that the smile you wear is not a reflection of your inner world, and yet you continue to wear it. Not because you want to deceive anyone, but because you do not know how to explain what is happening inside. You cannot find the words to express the emptiness, the heaviness, the numbness that fills you. And so you keep it hidden, not just from others, but from yourself as well. This guilt is often compounded by the belief that you should be able to handle things on your own, that your pain should be something you can manage, something you should be able to fix. There is a quiet shame that accompanies the need for help, a belief that asking for help is a sign of weakness, that to be depressed is to be flawed in some way, as if your inability to feel joy, to feel alive, is something that you should be ashamed of. The guilt comes from the fear that others might see you differently if they knew. It is the fear that you will be judged for not being strong enough, for not being able to cope with life's challenges in the way others do. It is the fear that your struggles will burden those around you, that they will pity you, or worse, that they will feel frustrated with you for not simply getting better. And so, you hide. You hide behind the mask of normalcy, behind the "I'm fine" that has become your shield. You hide behind the appearance of functioning, of going through the motions of life without letting anyone see the cracks beneath the surface. You hide because you are afraid that if you show your true self, if you allow others to see the weight you carry, they might not understand. Or worse, they might turn away. This guilt is not just about how others perceive you, it is about how you perceive yourself. It is the quiet judgment you place on your own worth when you can't shake the sadness, when you can't find the energy to get up, when you feel disconnected from everything and everyone around you. You begin to wonder, why can't I just be happy? Why can't I just get over this? What's wrong with me? The guilt becomes a cycle. The more you hide, the more you feel like you are failing, not just the world around you, but yourself. You feel like you are failing at being the person you think you should be. You feel like you are failing at life itself, and that feeling of failure only deepens the depression. But this guilt is rooted in a misunderstanding that depression is a choice, that it is something you can simply snap out of, that it is something that can be fixed if you just try hard enough. The truth, however, is much gentler. Depression is not a sign of weakness. It is not a reflection of your inability to handle life. It is an emotional response to the weight of the world, to the weight of your experiences, to the weight of an inner world that feels too heavy to carry alone. And yet, this guilt keeps you silent. It keeps you hiding, keeps you trapped in the belief that you must carry this burden alone. But in reality, the most important thing you can do is to allow yourself the space to be seen, to allow yourself to ask for help, to allow others to witness your pain and understand that it is not a weakness, but a part of the human experience. Letting go of this guilt is a process. It is about learning to see depression not as something you should be ashamed of, but as something that requires compassion. It is about understanding that you do not have to hide to be loved, that your pain does not diminish your worth. It is about giving yourself permission to show up as you are, to take off the mask, and to ask for the support you need without fear of judgment. The guilt of hiding is one of the heaviest burdens of depression. But it is also one of the easiest to release, not by forcing yourself to change, but by understanding that you are not alone. You are not a burden. You are simply human, and to be human is to carry both light and dark. To be human is to need others, and that is okay. There is a moment, usually quiet, often unmarked by fanfare, when the realization hits, the moment when you begin to see the truth about your depression, not through the eyes of judgment, but through the lens of self-awareness. It's a subtle shift, a turning point that arrives not as an answer, but as a question. A question that changes everything. Why am I continuing to carry this weight alone? This turning point doesn't come with clarity at first. It often comes in fragments, pieces of understanding that don't yet form a complete picture. But it is the beginning of something, the beginning of seeing your pain, not as a weakness, but as a signal. It is the moment when the mask that you've worn for so long starts to feel too heavy, when the smile you've been giving others starts to crack, and you finally begin to acknowledge the exhaustion you've been hiding. It is not the immediate decision to seek help, nor is it the sudden urge to tell someone your truth. It is simply the recognition that something is off. It is the quiet awareness that you cannot keep pretending, that the burden you carry is more than you can bear alone. It is the realization that the silence has lasted too long, and that perhaps the hardest part has not been the depression itself, but the refusal to see it, to name it, to understand it. At this moment, you may not even fully understand depression, but you begin to see it as a presence, a part of your life that you have been living around, but never truly living with. It is not a sudden break in the fog, but it is the first soft light filtering through it, the first small opening in the cloud of numbness. For many, this turning point is a quiet moment of surrender. It's when the mind stops fighting against the weight, stops asking, "Why me?" and starts asking, "How can I heal?" It is the moment when you let go of the need to do everything yourself, when the burden of self-reliance gives way to a quieter strength, the strength to reach out, to seek connection, to acknowledge your own vulnerability. In this moment, you may also feel a deep sense of fear. The fear of what others might think, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of appearing weak. But alongside that fear, there is something else. A quiet, buried truth. The desire for relief. The desire to stop carrying the weight of your pain in isolation. The desire to stop pretending. This turning point may not be dramatic. It may not be a full-on epiphany or a loud cry for help. It may simply be the shift in how you see yourself, from someone who has to fix everything alone to someone who is allowed to ask for help, from someone who must hold everything inside to someone who can share the burden, even if only with one person at a time. In the soft embrace of this realization, there is a release of the pressure to be perfect, to be strong, to be the person you think others want you to be. It is the acknowledgement that you are enough, not because you carry your pain silently, but because you are learning to live with it, to share it, to transform it into a strength, not through denial, but through acceptance. The turning point is a pivotal moment of truth, and though it may feel small in the beginning, it is the seed from which healing grows. It is the moment you stop being ashamed of your pain and begin to see it as a part of who you are, a part that does not define you, but that can help you understand yourself more fully. It is the moment you step into the truth that healing is possible, but it begins with acknowledging that you don't have to heal alone. Healing is not an instantaneous process. It is not something that can be rushed or forced. It is a slow, gradual unfolding, like a flower blooming in its own time. The path to healing from depression is not linear, nor is it always clear. It is the gentle journey of learning to live with the parts of you that have been hurt, of accepting that healing does not mean erasing the past, but learning to carry it with grace. The first step toward healing is simply acknowledging the need for it. It is the recognition that you do not have to carry the weight of your pain alone, that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. For so long, you may have believed that healing meant doing it by yourself, fighting your battles in silence. But now, you begin to see that true healing comes from connection, from reaching out, from allowing yourself to be seen, from being vulnerable enough to ask for the support you need. This is where healing begins, not in the mind alone, but in the heart. It begins with the permission to feel the pain, the sadness, the exhaustion, and to give yourself the grace to process it. Healing starts when you stop trying to outrun your emotions, when you stop pretending that everything is fine. It is when you allow yourself to sit with your feelings, to acknowledge them, and to understand that they are not a reflection of your worth, but a part of your human experience. Healing also comes in the small moments of self-care. It is the quiet act of nurturing your body, your mind, your soul, in ways that you may have neglected for far too long. It is about remembering that you are worthy of care, of love, of kindness, especially from yourself. This may look like taking time for rest, giving yourself permission to slow down, or reaching out to someone you trust to talk about what you are going through. It may look like setting boundaries to protect your emotional space, saying no when you need to, and giving yourself the time and space to heal. Healing is also about releasing the guilt and shame that often accompany depression. For so long, you may have believed that you were broken, that your pain was something to be hidden, something to be ashamed of. But healing comes when you realize that your struggles do not define you, and that you are not less than because of what you've endured. You are not a burden to others. You are simply human. And to be human is to experience both light and dark. This path to healing is not about erasing the pain. It is about learning to live alongside it, to understand it, and to grow from it. Healing is not about forgetting. It is about integrating the lessons that pain has brought, about finding strength in the very vulnerability that once felt so heavy. As you walk this path, there will be days when the weight feels too much to bear, when the depression resurfaces, when the struggle feels endless. But on these days, it's important to remember that healing is not an all-or-nothing process. It is the ebb and flow, the back and forth, the days of progress and the days of setback. Healing is about showing up for yourself again and again, even when it feels difficult, even when you want to retreat. And as you continue this journey, you will begin to notice the small shifts, the moments when you feel more present, more connected, more alive. You will begin to feel the gradual lightness that comes from letting go of the heavy burden you've carried for so long. You will begin to see that there is no shame in your scars, that they are simply a part of your story, a story of resilience, of strength, of quiet courage. The path to healing is not about perfection. It is about progress. It is about learning to love yourself, to care for yourself, to be patient with yourself as you move through the darkness. And it is about understanding that healing is not a destination, but a way of living, a way of being kind to yourself as you navigate the complexities of life. As you walk this path, remember that you are not alone. There is always support available, whether through the people you trust, through professional help, or through the community of others who understand. Healing is not a solitary journey. It is a shared experience, and in sharing it, we find strength. In this chapter, we close the journey not with a final answer, but with a quiet understanding. You are worthy of healing. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of peace. And as you continue to walk this path, you will find that healing, like everything else in life, comes in its own time. It comes with patience, with compassion, and with the deep knowing that, even in your darkest moments, you are enough.